It's on, the biggest Maytag sale of the year at Lowe's. Buy 2 select laundry appliances and get up to a $100 bonus via instant rebate. Shop all things Maytag, including the new stackable Pet Pro laundry system that removes pet hair from clothes. Lowe's, we help, you save. Offer valid through 5/31. See store for pricing and offer details. Advertise savings on all major Maytag appliances through Maytag.com and participating retailers. Prices may vary. Additional terms and conditions apply.
He was a police officer in New York. He was involved in multiple shootings. He says he was arrested, tried, and convicted for something he didn't do. He's here to set the record straight on the Law Enforcement Today show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Today radio show. I'm your host. My name's John J. Wiley. In addition to being a radio broadcaster, I'm a retired police sergeant. For the latest news articles and much more, check out our website, letradioshow.com. In the Law Enforcement Today show, we'll be joined by special guests. We'll be talking about their experiences and issues affecting law enforcement officers, first responders, their families, their community, and victims of horrendous crimes. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Our page is Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Check out the daily articles on our website, letradioshow.com. And while you're there, download our free app. The Law Enforcement Today show was brought to you by 4patriots.com. That's the number 4patriots.com. They offer the world's best survival food, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X and more. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use code LET to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order. Plus, free shipping on orders over $97. And a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com. That's a number 4patriots.com. Use code LET to get 10% off. Taking us from the New York area. We have Pete Thron on the phone. Pete is an ex-police officer. He is also author of many books. Just do a Google search for Pete Thron Books. That's spelled Thron. Pete, first of all, thanks for being guest on this show. Thanks for your service. It's all very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Jay, for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
One of the things that we want to do on this show, and I just want to let people know right away, Pete was arrested, tried, and convicted. And he's going to talk about that a little bit later on. And I've always made a point where we didn't do shows like this. But Pete said, I just want to tell my story. And there have been many officers who did nothing wrong that wound up being convicted and serving long prison sentences. So I had to take a hard look at this. And I reached out to Pete and said, Pete, let's talk. Part of your story, Pete, is you were a police officer and you were involved in multiple officer-involved shootings, and the media portrays those things so wrong. The first thing we want to do is we wanted to talk about that. How long were you policing?
I was a police officer for 10 years.
And whereabouts were you policing at?
I was in several boroughs in New York. I was mainly in Harlem, Manhattan.
Gotcha.
I worked some of the Bronx, some Brooklyn, and some Queens.
So none of them were cake assignments?
No, I was in what's called A houses. And an A house will, when you're in uniform, it will, as a uniform cop, if you're in a car, you're going to answer anywhere between 40 to 60 violent calls every night.
Yeah, that's the way it was for us in Baltimore. Look, the truth was, and I tell people this all the time, I see these photos of cops eating lunch together and all this stuff, and I'm like, what? We never had time for that. We had calls stacked up when we got our car after roll call. They were stacked up, and you were running sometimes 3-4 calls deep. They were waiting for you. There was just no stopping it.
Yeah, we had the same thing. You weren't going into a tour where it was you had a clean slate. We always had 10, 15, sometimes 20 calls that the day shift, depending on what shift you were working, they just couldn't get to it. So you were going to have to answer those calls besides the calls you were being called on. Right.
So the one stacked on top of the other. And we had a thing, and I don't know about your department, we had a thing about post integrity. So I was 635 in Baltimore, and we didn't want our side partners on other posts in our sector handling calls because that meant they had abandoned their post. And we didn't want people from other sectors coming into our sector to handle calls because that meant the same thing. They abandoned their sector, and we definitely didn't want officers from other districts to have to come in and handle calls in our area because it was a pride thing. It was like, if I can't handle this, why am I doing the job?
Yeah, it was the same thing for us. And the one thing that my partner and I, when I was in uniform, had worked out with our squad, we were the heavy hitters when it came to making collars. A lot of the other ones, they just want to do their 9 to 5, which was fine with us. So if we were on a building watching a drug location, they would cover our zone. If it was just maybe like an aided, if it wasn't a violent call, they took up the slack for us, so we could take up the slack for them when it came to making collars.
Yeah, I thought it was the same way for me. I was very proactive, very aggressive, and I ran with a bunch of other men and women in the police department that were. To be totally honest with you, I got promoted to sergeant. I thought I wanted a squad all like me, and it turns out, thank goodness I didn't get what I asked for, because I needed to have those report takers. I needed people that would create stability while the other ones were out there making all the arrests.
Yes, exactly. I agree 100%.
You got to have the traffic people. You got to have the report takers. You got to have everybody. I agree with you 100%. But when you work in a really busy area, am I correct? Were you like in the projects, the housing projects?
Yes, and that was one of the problems, because when I first got on the job was very old school, and they wanted the housing cops inside the projects, making arrests there, patrolling, which we did patrol, and we made arrests in there, but I was more of a narcotics cop and a gun. I looked for guns. That wasn't going on too much in the projects where I couldn't go in a person's home without their permission. So a lot of the drug dealing was going out in the streets, and then it would be brought into the actual projects to be either dealt or smoked or whatever. And I tried to explain that to my commanders, and they didn't want to hear it.
No.
So I kind of went against the grain, and it may have been wrong, but I don't think it was wrong. I made a lot of collars off project. I made them in the streets. It's just I knew that the drugs were going to go inside the project sooner or later, so I tried to prevent it that way.
We had a saying in our department, and when I got promoted to sergeant, one of the guys who got promoted at the same time as me, when I say guys, that means men and women. In this case, it was a male. His name is Fred Bielfeld, and he wound up becoming the police commissioner. And I'm going to paraphrase what he said. Later in his career, he says, we're focusing on bad guys with guns. That's the source of all the problems. And with drugs and drug gangs, they're usually heavily armed, and they're usually very violent. Is that a fair assessment for you?
100,000%. It is, and it's because both of our departments were very similar with how we policed. That's why you understand what I'm saying, and I understand exactly what you're saying. It's the guns are going to be in the drug organizations, and if a captain or a sergeant or lieutenant from the 1960s and 70s, they didn't understand that. They were used to the robberies at knife point, maybe with a zip gun, something like that.
When's the last time you saw a zip gun?
I only arrested one person with a zip gun.
For people who don't know, and I'm not very familiar with them, and we'll go into this discussion at a later date about gun laws. And how Maryland in particular passed a Saturday night special where cheap guns were taken off the street, and we were immediately faced with the high powers, the Rugers, the Glocks, and all that. Things changed overnight. But zip guns were handmade guns, and they used was it the antennas from cars?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, they'll find a way. Criminals will find a way to get at you, to get themselves armed, to accomplish their purpose. We're talking with Pete Thron. He is an ex-New York Housing Authority police officer, also author of many books. Just do a Google search for Pete Thron, Thron books. When we return on Law Enforcement Today Show, we're going to talk about some officer-involved shootings he was in, and then the arrest, trial, and conviction. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Authorities are now checking our grid for vulnerabilities. They've identified 9 key substations. If these substations are attacked, power could be knocked out from coast to coast for up to 18 months. Imagine a blackout lasting not days, but weeks or months. Your life would be frozen in time right at the moment the power fails. Lights all over the country would go out, throwing people into total darkness. That's why having your own solar power is more important than ever. With the new Patriot Power Generator 2000X, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside. But it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, or even your fridge. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use code LET to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in a store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order. Plus, free shipping on orders over $97, and a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com. That's the number 4patriots.com, and use code LET to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com. Use code LET to get yours today. It's the Law Enforcement Today Show. Returning our conversation with Pete Thron. He's an ex-New York Housing Authority police officer, and he was in multiple shootings, which we'll talk about now. He's arrested, tried, and convicted for a controversial case, and he's also author of many books. Do a Google search for Pete Thron, Thron books. Pete, there's no easy way of having these conversations. I always say this, young cops, and I did this, I was guilty of this. Young cops daydream about the things that old cops have nightmares over. And mine involved multiple shootings and multiple traumas, multiple murders, people being killed, and incidents where I was a victim of violent crime and had physical injuries, all that stuff. And I tell people I've gotten really good at purposely forgetting a lot of names. However, sometimes these incidents do pop up in my head, and at the least appropriate times, and they have an effect. But what I really disagree with is the media's portrayal of police officer-involved shootings. We can go into a long conversation about news, television, social, but they always portray the cop as a bad guy. You were involved in 3. Am I correct?
Yes.
Or
Yes, I was.
Were any of them like the news portrays them?
Fortunately for me, no, because I think that because of the time that I was involved in my shootings, it was the crack era, and I think New York was starting to realize that it was a war. It was a war on drugs. It was a suburban war, and I always got indemnified on my shootings. And they definitely affected me, and they still do to this day.
Oh, absolutely. There's not look, there'd be something wrong with you if it didn't affect you.
Yes, I agree 100%.
And sometimes I may seem distant, sometimes, and it's done because, I'll be honest with you, Pete, after a while I've learned I'm not like normal people. I went through some stuff, and I came out the other end. I have a good life, but I'm damaged, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm definitely damaged. If I hear a car backfire, I'm turning, my heart pounds, and I'm thinking it's a shot, and it's not a fun way to live. It really isn't.
No.
But it's just a way of life for us.
It is, and it's learning to live with it. That's the way I consider it nowadays. People talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, and I know it's very real. However, I do have an exception with the term disorder. I think I'm more along the lines of an injury, and that there's things that we have to do to be okay. Look, when you have orthopedic surgeries, orthopedic injuries, shoulder, knee, whatever it might be, you don't expect that joint to be the same way as it was before the injury, do you?
No, not exactly. Without a doubt, you don't.
Yeah, and so you can't expect yourself to be the same happy-go-lucky guy all the time, 24/7, 365, after being involved in police work, and especially when you're involved in deadly force situations.
100% correct. 100% correct on that. It's like you, I was injured pretty badly during one of the shootings, and it definitely affected me. It affects me physically now, where I can't breathe through my nose the right way.
Right. And good luck getting people to understand that. And I'm not saying we're looking for sympathy, tea and sympathy. I'm just saying sometimes it'd be nice if people understood.
Yeah, exactly. I get a few people that do, and of course they're in law enforcement. If they're not in law enforcement, the way the cops are painted right now, it's such a hard job to do right now. I tip my hat off to all police officers that work in that job.
One of the things that happened to me, Pete, and we're going to get to your shootings, is I was involved in 4 in a little more than 10 years. And none of them were like the news media says. The first 2, I never fired a shot back. They were over with before I really had a chance to respond. The second 2 were long, drawn-out affairs. The third one was a guy who murdered someone, robbed them, hit me head-on, and was shooting him at the same time out the car window. And that was a nasty affair. The last one was the typical, and I'm air quoting, unarmed man who tried to get control of my service weapon and shoot me in the face with it. And the typical unarmed man, and I just was a guest on a podcast recently, and he said, what do you think about all these unarmed men being shot? And I said, well, what point are they unarmed? And I told my story, and he's like, I never thought of that way.
Yes.
So your shootings, was there one theme on all of them that kind of connect all of them together?
No, they were pretty much all different situations. It's completely different situations. My first one, I was actually getting ready to arrest a person for, he was in possession of like 4 or 5 miles of crack. And I heard over the radio that the 2-5 precinct was chasing another car. They were in a car chase, exchanging shots, and they were heading right for me, right towards me. So I actually cut the guy loose because it was only a misdemeanor. I had the discretion to do that. Cut that guy loose, and I could hear the siren and the car racing towards the street that I was on. So I had put myself against the corner. My partner was still in the car, and he was getting ready to kind of like try to block that car off. And they took this turn. The perpetrator took the turn, saw me. Luckily, I had my gun out. He took 2 shots at me. One bullet went over my head. The bullet that went over my head hit the back of the wall that I was against, and I actually had several pieces of brick lodged in the back of my neck. I returned fire. I hit the driver's door 3 times. He ended up taking another turn down 117th Street at like 60 miles an hour, flipped the car, and I ran through my partner headed towards them, and I told my partner I'm going to cut through the lot. I saw the car. It was flipped completely over. The 2 guys, they were dressed in full black. They crawled out of the car. Both of them had lost their shoes because the car had flipped so many times, and they ran towards 116. The driver saw me running towards it. He turned on me again, fired a shot. I returned fire 3 times at him, but I was running. He was running. I did not hit him. They ended up taking a family hostage in an apartment building, and ESU, which is emergency service, a neighbor had called into 911, told the operator that he heard ruckus, people screaming in the building, in the apartment next to him, and we knew it was them, and ESU arrested them. And we recovered inside the car, there was 2 tasers, money, duct tape, rope.
The whole kit and caboodle, as they would say.
Thing.
We're talking about Pete Thron. He is an ex-New York housing police officer involved in multiple shootings and also arrested, convicted, and tried for a controversial case, which we'll talk about. He's author of many books. Just do a Google search for Pete Thron, Thron books. This is Law Enforcement Today's show. When we return, we're going to talk a little bit more about his shootings and then the controversial arrest. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. There was social media, and then there was social audio. Now the Breakout app combines the best of both. Best of all, the Breakout app is free with versions for iPhone and Android devices. You can download the app for free, www.letbreak.com.
I am Meg Marie O'Rourke from Harmony with Food. Do you ever wonder what foods you should or should not be consuming based on your own unique needs? At Harmony with Food, we are now able to determine exactly what foods we should or should not be consuming through advanced testing. Test, don't guess is the motto at Harmony with Food's BioUnique Boutique program. It has never been easier than now to determine what food, drinks, and supplements you need for your individualized needs. Head over to harmonywithfood.com and click on the testing tab.
Returning to our conversation on the Law Enforcement Today's show, we are joined by Pete Thron. Pete is an ex-New York housing police officer involved in 3 officer-involved shootings. He is eventually arrested, tried, and convicted for a controversial case, which we will talk about in a little bit. He's author of multiple books. Do a Google search for Pete Thron, Thron, books, and you will find them. Pete, one of the things that I'll be honest with you, I try to convince people of the realities of what it's like to be involved in deadly force situations and the reaction afterwards. And most of the time, they just don't get it. For example, the recent podcast I was on where I talked about shooting the unarmed man, and I said, do you know that many police officers, periodically, it's majority of police officers are shot and killed with their own service weapons? And he's like, no, I didn't know that. And I said, yeah, that's why that happens. We take out the equation all the different choices the bad guys had, which could have prevented this. And they had multiple, sometimes 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 decisions they made that led to deadly use of force. But all they seem to focus on, hey, is a cop fired his gun and he's a threat.
Right. And I had a situation like that where a perpetrator tried to get my gun, but he wasn't able to get it. And, in my mind, I'm thinking if he gets it, I'm gonna have to prevent him. I may have to shoot him.
Yeah.
But he didn't get to that point, thank God.
Well, and I go back to my incident where I was fighting with the gun, with the so-called unarmed man who got a hold of my weapon and tried to shoot me with it. And I thought, and I'll remember this to my dying day, Pete, that the thought came to my mind, this guy's trying to kill me. And I thought to myself, and I know this doesn't make sense logically, I'm going to die, but it won't be tonight, and it won't be because of him. And I was prepared at that point to do whatever it took to survive.
And that's, to me, that's the right attitude, because you have to go home to your family.
Right.
That's how I looked at it.
Yeah, if one of us had to perish that night, it had to be him. Fortunately, we both survived. But that wasn't for lack of trying. I want people to understand that. Mm-hmm. And that kind of went against, look, it was all justified. It was nothing wrong, nothing illegal, nothing about it was controversial. I wound up thinking I sprained my wrist and I had multiple hand surgeries, steel plates put in, and was retired at the age of 33 and to start a whole new life. But it did create a bit of a clash because I was never raised to be that guy. And when it came to extreme violence, I didn't understand that I was capable of that kind of violent reaction inside of me. Were you ever thrown back by your response?
Yeah. And you only start to realize that you are capable of it when you're put in that situation.
Right.
And that's the only time. I never thought I would. I'm not a violent person.
No, I'm not either. But, I feel like it sometimes, but I'm not. I'm really not. I'm a very peaceful person, and I strive for peace in my life all the time. As a matter of fact, I do better that way. One of the ultimate frustrations for me, and I'm sure for you, was, and without going into details of my story, you were arrested, convicted, and were you incarcerated for this controversial case you're going to talk about?
Yes, I was incarcerated for 2 years.
Trying to get people's attention and explain to them you didn't do what they thought you did, or, hey, it isn't as bad as you thought. How frustrating was that I was a good guy?
Just now people are realizing, because I started writing, and they read my first book. Now they realize, you know what, he didn't do it. Because they've asked other people, they read the book, they heard what I had to say, and they know that I was just doing my job that night, and I got caught up in another precinct that was dirty. And they threw me in with that precinct because I was patrolling in that precinct, but I was a housing cop. The precinct I'm talking about is the Dirty 30 was the 30th precinct, and it was around the same time. And they threw my case in with them.
What year was this?
1995.
All right, so it's still fairly recent. I don't know about you. I think 70s is old. I don't think 90s is that long ago, and I'm shocked at how long ago it really was.
Yes.
So you, without going into a lot of detail, what happened?
I was involved in a drug deal with buy and bust, where I would flash my own money, but never hand it over, and arrest the person that was dealing. That person that was dealing had a crew outside that was watching the apartment that the deal was going in. There were multiple people in the apartment that were also buying. I was trying to get in. I had arrested the dealer, told my partners to secure him. He was yelling that we were doing a rip on him. I showed him my shield. I had my partner showing it. He was yelling in Spanish that we were doing a rip. The people in front came up. They were going to come up to kill us. They were trying to kick the door in. I spoke to the two other people that were buying. I made the decision to have them go out through the back window that had a fire escape. They went down it. The people in the front of the building called over to the people that were trying to kick the door in, thinking it was us that was trying to escape. And they shot one of the guys I let go. And I was held accountable for that. The second guy that I had let go, he claimed that I had stole $1,700, but I actually had vouched that money as part of the evidence that we were doing with the arrest. But I marked the voucher. I know you'll understand this. The $1,700 was vouched under found property, so that would have enabled the guy that was making the claim to go into the precinct and claim that money, and we would have gave it back to him. That never happened. It was somehow, not by me, by another police officer, marked also arrest evidence. So the voucher itself was marked found and arrest evidence, which then made it impossible for the guy to get his money back. Internal Affairs got involved. It was a big fight between my captain, who I'm very good friends with. Suspensions happened. About a year later, I was out of uniform. I was back in uniform. I was waiting to be made detective. That never happened. And I think a DA told me, listen, that my name was being mentioned, that I was up to be indicted under the Special Prosecution Unit. Sure enough, I was indicted. And I surrendered. There was a $100,000 bail. I paid $10,000 of cash that I borrowed, and we put up two houses, my mother and my wife's house, my ex-wife's house. We took it to trial, and our thoughts were that if I beat, because it had me for an armed robbery, and the thoughts were, if you beat the robbery charge, you're going to beat everything else. I did beat that charge. I was found not guilty, but they found me guilty of the money that I vouchered. They said that I enabled him to get it back because the voucher was marked arrest evidence, which I didn't do. Someone else did it. And they got me for a larceny.
Right, we're going to take a short break. We're talking Pete Thron. He is an ex-New York Housing Authority police officer. We're talking about when he's arrested, tried, and convicted. He's also author of many books. Do a Google search for Pete Thron, Thron books, and you will find them. We return to our conversation with Pete on Law Enforcement Today's show. We're going to talk about the trial, the conviction, his incarceration, and rebuilding his life afterwards. There's only one official Facebook page. What you do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today radio show. Click like and follow. There you'll find updates about upcoming episodes of the radio show. You can contact me. We also find unique, one-of-a-kind editorials and news articles. That is our Facebook page, Law Enforcement Today radio show. Be sure to click like and follow. We'll see you there. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. There's only one official Facebook page. What you do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Today radio show. Click like and follow. There you'll find updates about upcoming episodes of the radio show. You can contact me. We also find unique, one-of-a-kind editorials and news articles. That is our Facebook page, Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Be sure to click like and follow. We'll see you there.
Are you wondering where you can find more great podcasts? Head to letradioshow.com, click Be Heard, and discover other fantastic podcasts like this one. Also available on our free app, all at letradioshow.com.
This is the Law Enforcement Today Show. I'm John J. Wiley, returning to our conversation with Pete Thron. Pete is an ex-New York Housing Authority police officer. He was arrested, tried, and convicted for a controversial case. He's author of multiple books. Do a Google search for Pete Thron, Thron, books, and you will find them. Pete, when we went to break, you're talking about if you got found not guilty in the armed robbery charge, which you were, it should be dismissed on everything. That wasn't the case. And it sounds like to me, and I don't know you from Adam, it sounds like to me this was a clerical situation, and obviously a clerical situation when something is marked as found property or arrest evidence. And somehow they found a way to stick you with it and say, I can't get him on the armed robbery, but I'm going to get him on this. And that's what they did. Am I wrong?
Yes, you're 100% right. They actually had gotten me for falsifying a business record, which was my memo book. I had wrote that I was in a place at the wrong time when I wasn't, but I was actually in that place, but about 15 minutes earlier. So they hit me with that. And I got convicted of 3 felonies, nonviolent, and the judge gave me 2 to 4 years in jail.
That must have been a heavy hit because, look, I prided myself, and I still do, on being one of the good guys. It doesn't mean I'm a saint. It just means, look, I don't purposely go out and violate the law, and I don't hurt people, and I don't steal. I don't do all those things that corrupt guys do. It doesn't sound like you did either. What was your reaction when you were found guilty? Did you think, look, we'll appeal this, and they're going to come to their senses?
Yes, and that's what we ended up doing, and that was a debacle too, because it's a long story, but ultimately, I knew I was innocent. A captain and a lieutenant knew I was innocent. They wrote letters. They got suspended 30 days without pay for writing me letters to the judge saying that I was unjustly convicted. The captain actually retired because I was arrested. I did go to prison. I went to prison for 2 years, and it was the scariest thing in my life. I mean, there were people in there that I knew I put away, and I just didn't know if I was ever going to run into them. And during my sentence, when I ended up, I actually ended up getting paroled, but you have to wait like a month before you go home. I was stabbed like 2 weeks before I was going home, and the guy said, "Listen, this is how we do it in Buffalo, cop." And I said, "I'm not a cop. I'm a convict, just like you." The problem I had to deal with was I had to become one of them in order to survive. But I still had that blue blood running through my veins, and I tried to stay grounded with that, but you just can't if you want to survive jail.
What's still saying, when in Rome, you do as a Roman. Look, I don't even know where to begin because I don't have a point of reference in this conversation. All I have is what Hollywood shows, and I know they get so much wrong that my imagination tells me that, I know I can't fight my way out of every potential scrap there is. That's just not possible. Someone's bigger, stronger, luckier, crazier, whatever it might be. They're going to get you. Mm-hmm. So you got to find a way to appease the crowd and the violence to reduce the threat to yourself and do your time and not create a problem for everybody else. And to me, that would seem like a big catch-22.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I did was I made sure I was in ridiculous shape to if I had to fight. But I also learned through my training with ATF when I was over there that your mouth is your biggest weapon. It's right. How you talk to people. And these guys, they knew I wasn't. They knew I shouldn't have been in there just by the way I held myself. And most of them, they respected me. And I didn't have a lot of problems. I saw a lot of things, but I personally did not have a lot of problems. I think my biggest thing was the first 6 months, not a day went by that I didn't think about killing myself because I didn't think I was going to be able to handle it. But after that time, then I said, okay, I can handle it. I got to get home to my kids. That's all that matters. I can't put my family through me killing myself. My mother and my brother and sister and my kids won't be able to handle it. So I held on to life, and it wasn't the easiest thing, but I did it.
Sounds like you hit a turning point in your life behind bars where, like, I got to make conscious decisions to act differently and build a life afterwards. Am I correct on that one?
Yes. When I got out, all I wanted to do was focus on it was being a good father to my children and trying to get employment where I could put bread on the table. And that was not easy. It still isn't easy now. I can't get a regular job because I have that record and they see ex-cop. So I can't do what I'm good at. I was told I was one of the best investigators in New York when I was a cop. And I can't even get a job as an investigator. I can't hold a PI license, and I can't do much. I have to do, that's why I started writing.
I was just going to ask that. Is that what motivated you to start writing?
Yes. When I was telling my cellmate, who was actually an ex-cop too, I said, you know what, Matt? I think I want to write about what happened when I get out. And I even told him what the cover was. The judge is shattering my shield. He loved the idea. But I waited 20 years to do it. I wanted to wait for my children to get older because I did not want to put my family through that ordeal again. I just knew I couldn't do it, so I waited.
I get
waited
that.
about 22 years.
And here's the reality. Earlier I said there's parts of my policing story I don't talk about. Number one is because I don't want to relive them. But number two is not just my story. It's my ex-wife's story. It's my daughter's story. It's my family's story because they have the same last name as me, and I don't have a right to bring any scrutiny to them.
You hit that right on the head, and that's the reason. One of the reasons I waited. And when I got finished with the book, my family was floored. My mother, my brother, and sister, they had no idea what I went through as a cop because I never brought it home. I did not discuss what I did on the job ever with them. And when they read it, they just were like, how come you never spoke to us? I said, what was I supposed to do? Talk about a child being molested at the dinner table? I said, I can't talk about that.
No.
So you hold it all in. You live with that.
I'm in the same era that we didn't talk about things, Pete, because number one, my family members worried enough. They didn't need the added thing on there. And quite honestly, I didn't know how to talk about it. So my best way of dealing with it was to try to blot things out, focus on other things. And I was one of the guys who turned to alcohol, and that was not good for me. Your book, writing it, your first book, was that kind of a cathartic healing process for you?
A lot of people ask me that, and it really wasn't. It actually brought my PTSD into a worse situation because I was reliving these events that I was writing about and having nightmares every day, waking up, sweating, wondering where I was and my prison experience. I like nothing ever happened to me except being stabbed, but you still live with that fact that you may get killed at any moment.
Right.
You can be killed, and it's a tough thing to live with.
What's the name of the first book you wrote?
The first name of my book is first book was End of Tour.
And people can find it online. There's multiple places they can find it. Very quickly, they Google Pete Thron, Thron books. Is it available online, Amazon, all those places?
Yes, it is.
Pete, I want to thank you for being guest on the show, and I really want to thank you, for your service, and to be totally honest with you, for being able to talk about these things in a way that I know I couldn't. To handle yourself with the decorum you did is admirable, and I sense that you're still kind of angry about this, and I would be too, and I think I'd be angry till my last living breath.
I am, but I want to thank you Jay, for letting me be on the show and talk about it.
Awesome. Pete Thron, again, thanks for your service. Thanks for being a guest on Law Enforcement Today's show. All very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Jay.
I'd like to thank our guests so much for coming on the Law Enforcement Today radio show. The Law Enforcement Today radio show is a nationally syndicated radio show broadcast on numerous stations once a week and growing. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, please do me a big favor. Tell a friend. I'll be back in just a couple days with a brand new episode of the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.